In the first year of war, a controversial idea emerged, fundamentally changing the nature of modern battlefields forever. The German Empire sought new tactical advantages, as the war reached a prolonged stalemate on the Western Front. In that context, military scientists began researching the use of chemical gases as a weapon in warfare. Chlorine gas was selected, due to its ease of production, and its rapid effects under battlefield conditions. Initial experiments took place in laboratories, testing the stability and dispersal behavior of the gas under controlled conditions. Early results showed the gas could spread rapidly, especially when wind conditions supported its directional movement across terrain. Researchers began considering real battlefield deployment, moving beyond controlled environments toward practical military application scenarios. Test locations were carefully selected, ensuring stable wind conditions and terrain suitable for controlled observation and measurement. Military units received basic training to understand the operation and control of gas release mechanisms during deployment. Final preparations were underway, as the experimental plan transitioned from theoretical study into real battlefield implementation. The first test day approached. Units were quietly deployed, waiting for the most favorable weather conditions to proceed. Wind conditions were constantly monitored, as direction and speed determined the effectiveness of gas deployment across enemy positions. Gas cylinders were positioned along the front line, prepared for synchronized valve release according to a carefully planned sequence. A waiting order was maintained in silence, as all units held position, ready for the signal to begin. When the signal was given, valves began opening, marking the first real battlefield deployment of gas in warfare history. The gas began to release, spreading along the front line, moving slowly in the direction dictated by calculated wind patterns. Observers recorded the dispersion, monitoring speed and range of gas movement under actual battlefield environmental conditions. Initial findings showed the gas maintained a certain density, as it traveled close to the ground under stable conditions. Units continued monitoring, evaluating the level of control and predictability of this new deployment method under battlefield conditions. The experiment marked a critical transition, from laboratory research toward real-world application in the context of modern warfare. As the gas continued spreading, observation units began recording the first reactions emerging from opposing forces across the field. Enemy reactions were uneven, indicating that the level of impact depended on position and varying environmental conditions across the battlefield. Scientists recognized that weather factors played a decisive role, directly influencing the effectiveness of gas deployment in real conditions. Experimental results were carefully documented, intended to support improvements in methods and tactical applications in future operations. This experiment quickly drew attention, opening a new chapter in the development of modern chemical warfare strategies. Information from the experiment was sent to higher command, where strategists began evaluating its broader military potential and implications. Reports highlighted potential effectiveness, but also pointed out limitations strongly dependent on environmental and atmospheric conditions during deployment. Military leaders considered expansion, evaluating the possibility of applying the method across multiple sectors of the battlefield environment. At the same time, opposing forces began recognizing the change, prompting them to seek new forms of protective countermeasures. This initial experiment paved the way for the rapid development of chemical warfare in subsequent phases of the ongoing conflict. News of gas usage spread rapidly, drawing significant attention from other nations involved in the ongoing global conflict. Allied nations began analyzing the event, seeking to understand the nature and impact of this new form of weapon. Allied scientists were mobilized, beginning research to counter the threat and develop effective protective measures for troops. Early research into gas masks was accelerated, aiming to reduce the impact of gas exposure on soldiers in battlefield conditions. A scientific race began to emerge, as both sides sought to improve and adapt to the realities of chemical warfare. The use of gas rapidly expanded, as strategists recognized its potential to exert significant pressure across battlefield positions. Deployment methods were refined, aiming to improve accuracy and reduce complete dependence on unpredictable wind conditions during operations. At the same time, other gases began to be researched, aiming to enhance effectiveness and improve control during deployment. Battles began to reflect this change, as gas became a familiar element integrated into evolving tactical approaches on both sides. Chemical warfare gradually became part of reality, raising profound questions about the limits and responsibilities of scientific advancement. Reports from the battlefield sparked debate, as the international community questioned the legality of this emerging method of warfare. Pre-war treaties were revisited, particularly those addressing restrictions on the use of chemical weapons in armed conflict. However, wartime realities led many to justify that the use of gas was necessary under extraordinary and extreme conditions. Scientists also faced ethical questions, as their work was increasingly applied for military purposes beyond purely scientific intentions. These events marked a turning point, as science and warfare became more closely intertwined than ever before in history. After initial deployments, comprehensive reports were compiled, aiming to assess the long-term impact on battlefield dynamics and outcomes. Collected data improved understanding regarding environmental effects and limitations associated with the use of gas in warfare contexts. Clear limitations were identified, especially the strong dependence on natural conditions that could not be fully controlled in combat. These experiences were used to develop new tactics and refine technologies in later phases of the ongoing conflict. From a modern perspective, this experiment is seen as a turning point, laying the foundation for enduring ethical debates. After the war ended, the international community began seriously considering limiting the future use of chemical weapons in conflict. International treaties were proposed, aiming to establish clear limits on the development and use of toxic gases in warfare. Memories of chemical warfare remained, deeply influencing global awareness of the potential dangers associated with scientific advancement. Scientific research continued to advance, but accompanied by stricter regulations and ethical considerations guiding its application in modern contexts. That experiment is still studied today as an important lesson about the boundary between progress and responsibility in science. In the years after the war, many nations continued research, but under closer supervision from the international community. International organizations were established to monitor and control the development of dangerous weapons in the future. Lessons from the past were integrated into education, helping future generations better understand the consequences of warfare and conflict. Historians continued analyzing, seeking deeper understanding of how those decisions influenced the broader course of human history. The story of that experiment concludes, yet its lessons continue to influence the modern world and global perspectives today. In historical records, this experiment is often referenced as a defining example of innovation within the context of warfare. Remaining images and records help reconstruct how science was applied within the challenging circumstances of wartime environments. Over time, perspectives on the experiment have shifted, as ethical values became increasingly prioritized in scientific and military discussions. Modern analyses focus not only on effectiveness, but also deeply evaluate long-term consequences for society and global stability. Ultimately, the experiment serves as a reminder that all scientific progress must be accompanied by responsibility and careful consideration. Looking back at the entire process, historians observe a clear transition from small experiments to large-scale strategic implementation. This process demonstrates how war drives innovation, while simultaneously increasing risks that are difficult to fully control or predict. Lessons from this period continued to be applied in shaping international rules and frameworks governing conduct during warfare. These regulations were not only legal, but also reflected humanity's effort to control the use of advancing technologies responsibly. The legacy of the experiment endures as part of history, reminding us of the power and responsibility inherent in science. As the story approaches its conclusion, modern researchers continue emphasizing the importance of learning from historical experiences. Events from the past are revisited, not to repeat them, but to understand and prevent similar mistakes in the future. Through these studies, modern society gains clearer awareness of the long-term consequences of decisions made during wartime. These analyses contribute to building a strong foundation for ethical principles guiding modern scientific practices and responsibilities. From a global perspective, the experiment becomes a symbol of the complex relationship between science and warfare. Subsequent scientific advances are placed within frameworks, ensuring they serve the broader interests of humanity and global well-being. The story of this experiment belongs not only to the past, but also serves as a lesson for future generations. These memories are preserved as an essential part of history, helping to shape the direction of the future. When looking back, that experiment reminds us that every action leaves a lasting imprint on history and humanity. Ultimately, the story closes in silence, leaving deep reflection on science, war, and the responsibility of humanity.